What's going on, you guys? Welcome to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple. If you're looking to create more in your life, and if you want more of anything, it's not about doing more, it's about being more. So I'm excited you're here, and I'll see you guys on the inside. Alrighty, man. I'm really excited to go deep with you here on this question specifically, Jon, because as soon as I became aware of you and started learning a little bit about you, I was humbled by the high degree of mental horsepower you're bringing to the things that you're creating. So I know that one of the things you talk about is unlocking trapped mindsets about reality, and I would be pretty pumped if you'd go a little deeper on that for us.
I would be delighted to, and thank you. Very complimentary introduction. So I've had a kind of strange journey, and it's taken a number of decades. And I'm going to start way back with kind of what I originally was, which was I was trained as or brought up as an atheist and a rationalist and trained in sciences. And there was a point in time at which I was on a training and I had a psychic experience where I was connected with somebody who all I knew was his name and kind of vaguely where he was. And I knew what it was like to be inside him to the extent that I could feel the pain that he had from a brain tumor. Wow. I didn't know that he had a brain tumor, but that's what somebody else had written on a card. That was a kind of jaw-dropping moment, because not just because it wasn't something that I even imagined I could have done, but because all my scientific background said that's not possible. So when I talk about people engaging with a different reality, it comes from a place of having spent the next 20 years after that event figuring out how does reality really work in such a way that all the things that we know scientifically, well, they don't stop being true, but there's something that science misses that sits in the place that allows us to connect with each other, which kind of inhabits what I know you've had other guests kind of talk about our inner world, our mindset, how we kind of create our reality. And that's part of the picture, or maybe half the picture, because what tends to come out of a lot of those ways of thinking has to do with what we do from inside. But it doesn't say enough, from my point of view, about how we connect intuitively with what's going on outside. And the result of coming too much from inside is that we kind of know how to swim, but if somebody throws us into the river, we don't know which is upstream and which is downstream. And that's really pretty crucial if you want to be in flow with the universe, and if you want a sense that the universe has your back, which I think most people would like. And when you're in a world which more than ever is kind of overwhelming, and where the complexity of what's going on is just like mind-boggling, and that's in life, that's in business, it's in politics. I mean, there is just so much happening. So what's the difference we need in the way that we engage with that will actually make it easier and less stressful?
So would you give us just your definition of intuition so that we're all on the same page with that?
Well, a great question, because there are lots of different aspects to intuition. So, I mean, the ability to do what I described in that experience would be a form of intuition, but there's a lot more which people will maybe feel is closer to where they live, which has to do with our ability to sense what's going on around us, to be attuned to other people, to be able to connect with what I was talking about in terms of the flow of events. Where's everything kind of going naturally? What is downstream and what is upstream? And we have a lot of different ways in which, if we allow ourselves the space and time to do that, we can do that to some degree naturally, if we can get out of our cognitive mind, out of our thinking, rational mind for long enough to do so. I mean, one of the things I've done in the past, and will probably do again in the future, is I actually train people in intuition. So it's possible to go quite deep with that process. And lots of people experience their intuition in different ways. So, that can be gut feel, that people have a sense in their body of what's going on. Or it can be picking up on clues where you don't know where that information comes from, but you just have a sense, oh, I know this. I know what's happening here. Or some people, when they do intuition, they actually see pictures. I mean, a lot of people know the word clairvoyance, and a lot of people think that if you're going to do intuition, you have to see pictures. Well, you don't. Only maybe 25% of people will see pictures. And some people will get clues in all sorts of odd ways. They'll hear a snatch of a song, or something will come to their attention when they're walking along the street, and that will be a clue to, oh, this is what my mind is currently aware of. What can it feel and sense in my environment?
Okay, and like intuition is something that I've thought about and studied a lot, and I feel like the more I discover, the less I really know. And it's like I have this like modicum, right, of knowledge, and like I don't know if I've made it to 1% yet. And as I think about that, like one of the things that always helps me, contrast gives me clarity. And so I've thought a lot about what intuition maybe is not, because I feel like there's another voice, which is kind of that voice from the thinking mind, right? My ego. And like that's the one that is based in fear and like what I actually like know, as opposed to that infinite space. And so I don't know if like opposite's the right word, but how do you differentiate between the two voices and really know that it's intuition and not just this part of me that's trying to get me to do what is safe, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it takes some practice, and you can make it easier by using a lot of the techniques that other people will talk about. Breathing, relaxation, being mindful, and kind of becoming aware of what your mind does when it is doing everything that you describe. So really recognizing what are my habitual ways of being, and the things that do come from well, let's go with the word ego, that do come from the fear. And there's something that the more you practice kind of just letting go of that and seeing what comes, there is a space that you can access that feels different. It's got a different quality to it, a different sensation to it. And I don't think it takes a hell of a lot of practice to get to the point where you can actually sense the difference between the monkey mind and
Yeah,
the
I love that
intuitive
term.
one.
It's such an
Yeah.
accurate term, monkey mind, and every time I hear it, I can relate very well. It's like there's a million monkeys banging on pianos in my head, swinging around, and everybody wants to be right. So, what about like
Mm-hmm.
with regards to like choice and awareness? I know, like to me, like the ego lives in unawareness, and unawareness is anytime I leave the present moment. But when I'm aware, I feel like that's one of the really good steps towards kind of creating from love, if you will, which is not romantic love, obviously, but I just mean aligned with the most authentic
Mm.
version of me. God is love, and that's what I was created out of. And it's not a religious
Mm-hmm.
discussion, but when I get out of alignment with that, that's where anxiety and the frustration and fear, or even guilt and depression, come in. But long-term energy and happiness seem to come with alignment in the present moment, and that's awareness to me. And I'm just curious your ideas on choice and awareness. And
Yeah. So, I mean, the awareness does go with that ability to distinguish what the flow is and to be in that intuitive space. And then one of the things that I think is really important about choice is that we get trained, and our cognitive mind, our monkey minds, get trained to kind of look at causes and effects and to make plans and to think, oh well, if I do this, this will happen. And then we get into we get into the future too much, to where we think we can kind of dictate the sequence of events that's going to come, and that's when we start to lose touch with the flow, because the flow is very much in the present. And so understanding that making long-term decisions actually is not the best way, particularly to handle complexity, because it's much more a kind of a choose and respond. So to be in the moment with a choice, to sense what's the best choice in this moment, and then allow things to unfold for however long, allow a sense of the energetic response to that, or see the response in the world, and be willing to change that choice, whether it's 10 seconds or 10 hours or 10 days later, because the world has moved on and it's giving you different feedback, so that we don't get attached to our plans. I mean, there's an expression you probably know: man plans, God laughs.
yeah, well, or Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And
That's true too.
yeah, but like I used to do that. I would make these like glorious, complex plans, and I would be more intentional about like being right about my plan than actually getting what I wanted. So I wouldn't pivot or change when I get into action. I start getting feedback. Maybe this isn't the way to go, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna cram the square peg through the round hole. I don't care how hard I have to, force it. And force doesn't work. Force isn't powerful. There's counterforce to force, and it's stressful, and there's resistance. And you keep using the word flow, and man, I I know when I'm flowing, and can definitely tell when I'm not, because everything gets harder. And so
Hmm.
when you talk about flow, how do you help people understand what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, a lot of what you've just said is absolutely in that space. And I think, well, I know that I have certainly had the experience of deciding that this was my plan and I was going to make it happen. And I learned quite a long time ago how badly I could go wrong with that.
Yes.
I could force something where the resistance from the universe was actually really clear, that I was pushing against what was naturally going to happen. And because I forced it, I mean, I ended up, one example of that is I bought a house, which I really should not have bought at a time when I should have not been buying a house at all. I should have stayed where I was. And that cost me a lot. It cost me financially, and it cost me in hassle, and all sorts of things. So I know what the experience you're describing is. And if I look back on that, the answer to your question is, well, what if I'd actually looked at what was happening? What if I'd said, oh, actually, it's very clear that I'm doing this against the grain, or going uphill. Maybe I should check out whether I need to pivot, whether I need to change direction. So I think most people have had an experience of that. It may not have been as big as buying a house, but most people have had an experience of pushing against the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, myself included, are experts at that. But really just working I mean, ease, peace, and flow is the alternative, and that sounds way better. And I know when I'm in flow, like I just feel better. And when I feel better, everything's better. My relationships are better. I'm more tied to my purpose. I'm more creative. I'm more innovative. When I'm forcing it, I'm just reacting to these like childhood ideas of what I think I need to be whole and complete. And, childhood Kevin lived in the 80s. Like that's some outdated information I'm trying to create on. And so I need to be a little more current with my awareness. So what's spiral dynamics? Can you help me understand that a little bit? I know you're a master trainer in that area, but I'm not really familiar with that, and I read a little bit about it, but I felt like I was actually more confused than when I started.
Well, there's a lot of confusing information out there. Um, some of it is not very accurate to what spiral dynamics is. So let me try and give a short version of what is really quite a powerful and very complex theory, because it works at organizational level, it works at societal level, it works for individual development. And what it basically says is that when we develop, we go through a certain set of ways of thinking, which they're kind of their priority codes for, oh, this is what is going to lead to a successful life. And there's a time scale for the evolution of that which covers the whole of humanity, from the time when we first emerged as humans all the way to the present day. But it's maybe easier to relate to if I mean, one of the places I've written about this is I have a book on parenting. So think about the stages that a child goes through. So they go through a stage where they're helpless and where all they have to do is survive, and they need somebody else to take care of them to survive. That's kind of stage one. As they come out of that, they go into stage two. And stage two is one where you become aware of what's around you, particularly of your family and your environment, and you begin to form a sense of who I am is my relationship with my parents. They are who I am, and that's kind of as far as it goes. Then children hit the terrible twos, and you get the nasty words like mine and no.
Yeah.
And that's the point at which people are entering a third stage, where the mindset in that is, well, who am I and how do I become the most of what I can be? And how do I push back against all these forces that want to restrain me and hold me where I am? So maybe I'll give you one more stage out of the kind of 7 that are
Yeah.
relevant right now. We can go into more if you want. The fourth stage is the one that children hit when they start to go into kindergarten, where they learn that there's boundaries to being who you are and being impulsive and getting what you want, which relate to, well, these are the codes that I'm expected to live by. I don't snatch, I don't hit. So the fourth stage is one about rules. Well, each of those stages lives inside of us, and at some point we tend to develop through those stages, and at some point, depending on the environment we're in, because all of this is also a response, it's an adaptive response to the conditions that we live in. At some point we decide that, okay, this is how I want to be. So some people will stop in that third stage, because I can be I can be who I am, um, as a member of the mafia, and that will work for me to be in stage 3. I can be impulsive, I can battle with people, I can look at what's the most powerful thing I can do, or how do I accommodate to other people's power. Or people will get to the fourth stage, and the fourth stage, they'll take on religion, they'll take on the rules of the world, and they'll find it really comfortable. This is how I adapt, this is how I survive, this is the best way for me to be in the world. So there's more stages beyond that, but spiral dynamics is is about those different voices in ourselves, the different trends that creates in different populations according to the whole mix of society. And it has a hell of a lot to say. I mean, if people who are listening are running organizations, it's got so much to say about how to make organizations run better and work with the different kind of voices and the different dynamics that are living inside your company.
Yeah. Oh wow. So what's the role of intuition in moving through these stages?
Well, one of the ways I use intuition is my ability to sense what which one of those value systems, which one of those priority codes is speaking uh, through people in my environment. So, I can take my intuition and I can apply it to the way that I use a, a model, a theory like spiral dynamics. And of course, people can use their intuition. Maybe they're familiar with other models. Maybe they've worked with, I don't know, Enneagram or Myers-Briggs. They can use intuition in that space too. They can learn how to sense that and not just to have to kind of get people to do an assessment in order to find where they are on any one of those different scales. I mean, intuition in relation to where intuition sits in the spiral, it's much more natural for societies that are living in the second stage. So they're still in that kind of tribal space. They've got that the place where they're operating. They've got shamans. They're connecting with nature through intuition, and that disappears as you get further up the spiral for a while, because when we get into the fifth stage, which I didn't talk about, but that's the one which is all about science and technology and where we are and strategy, and it's the one which is the most mental of all, which is part of why we're having this conversation, because that's where so many of us have been raised. We've been brought up in to think that stage 5 is absolutely it. We have to actually pull back. This is why I talk about science and having to see science differently, because we have to pull back from that fifth stage in order to get to the place where we allow intuition back in. So intuition comes back in kind of at stages 7 and 8 of the spiral in a really powerful way.
And what are those stages?
Okay, so the sixth stage, which I missed out, I'll talk about before I get to 7 and 8. The sixth stage is the one where we're totally focused on people, on harmony with people, on psychology. So that's where a lot of us who are kind of in these kinds of conversations, we've moved from the fifth stage to the sixth stage, and we're very much focused on psychology and our inner being. The seventh stage gets really interesting, because in the first 6, people tend to see only the stage they're in, or they focus on the stage that they're in. In order to handle the complexity of a world which has all those different stages, speaking through all the people in the world, the 7th stage, we have to start to integrate and see all of those stages together. And so that becomes that's where people need to a much more systemic level of thinking to be able to hold all those different things that are happening at once, the paradoxes that actually exist in that kind of world. And then the 8th stage, we integrate ourselves more with nature and with the whole of the cosmos in that. And so there are powerful mindsets which go with those shifts of thinking.
And so kind of how we do anything is how we do everything quite often. And so if I'm in the 8th stage professionally, would I be there personally, or do you kind of vacillate and move back to different stages throughout your development, or once you're on 8, you're on 8?
No, people. one of the ways we describe this is people are chords, not notes. So actually, according to your environment, I mean, people when they go home to be with their grandparents and family, they will actually go back internally. They will often leverage a lot of their second stage system because that's where it was built. So all of the stages exist in us, and when we're in one, we're in one. So we will operate from that mindset. So there's no sense that when people get to a stage they can't move back, and there's very few people who are really operating from stage 8. There's probably a reasonable number who have a glimpse of what stage 8 is like and who are kind of exploring that. But most of us live most of our lives from places which are not so far up. Um, yeah.
So is 8,
Also.
I don't want to put words in your mouth by any means. I just want to understand. Is it a oneness with nature? Is that accurate?
It includes, yeah, it's a holistic way of looking at the world, and it is the place where we are most able to engage with nature in oneness, not just from a conceptual place, but where we can actually we get more attuned to the sensing and the feeling of that. So it's the place where that shamanistic connection that was in stage 2, where that actually comes back, and we become kind of modern shamans, and not just in relation to nature, but in our perceptual system of how we relate to the world. And there's lots of kind of stuff that's out there in the world now, which is about, well, some of that, the nature of that relationship and that ability to sense into the currents of the information field that inhabits the world and which drives the world. That's where we also, there are people who are talking about the how how we all creatures developed with an inner chemistry which has a relationship with mushrooms like psilocybin. So our body chemistry actually includes that ability to connect with what's beyond that people talk about if they've done magic mushrooms, or if they I mean, I don't do that stuff now, but when I was a student, I grew up, just after the 60s. So acid was something that I experienced way back then. So I know what that's also like as an inner process. You don't have to take acid to have that. Lots of people, when they develop their awareness, they find out how you can do that without a chemical assistance.
And
But I'm
so,
describing a kind of a world in which that's the underpinning.
yeah, and psilocybin is legal in a lot of places in the U.S. now, actually. So it's getting to be somewhat, I don't want to use the word mainstream, but I know there's a lot more openness to it. And I think the biggest benefit that created for me was really understanding that I've made up so many things, and all these things that I've made up are these walls that are preventing me from actually feeling the way I want to feel. And it
Mm-hmm.
allowed for this massive like grace for myself and for other people. And it's like we're all literally just doing the best we can. And the people who are really not, acting right, whatever that means to you, they're the ones who are struggling the most. And like it is one of the greatest things in the world to return love for hate. And it is such a cool stepping stone to that when you learn to let go of the walls you've put up in between you and other people, or who your most true self. And so I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. Well,
Yeah, I mean, I
let's
like the way you express that.
Let's make sure I want to mention your books. I know that you've written The Science of Possibility and Reinventing Capitalism. You mentioned a book about parenting too. I don't have the name of that. Could you share that with us?
That's called 7-Stage Parenting.
Yeah,
So
man,
yeah,
you're
it's about how to be the right. I've described the children being at those stages. It's about how each of those stages asks for a different kind of parent. So it's how to be that.
cool. Yeah, that's fascinating. All right, we're gonna shift gears and do a few quick questions here and get you on your way to go finish decoding our inner world. Holy cow! And this is deep. This is good. Really curious. Just not if there's not to oversimplify, but is there a technique if somebody asked you what is a way I can sharpen my ability to use my intuition? Is there something you could share that may be helpful for everybody listening?
Well, I guess, say more or less what I think I said before, which is um, finding your way to center yourself and listen, tune in, sense what's going on that isn't coming from your usual way of thinking. And there's lots of there's lots of kind of ways of supporting that. I mean, lots of people use divination cards, and so they'll pull out I work. I have some friends who've done a lovely set of nature based. They're called colimbri. Um,
Where would
you could
people go
find the
to find
cards on
something like that?
colimbri.com. So KOLIMBRI. And so they've done beautiful kind of intuitive sensitive pictures of various animals. And so when you want to tune into something, you can shuffle the cards and draw one, and you can then tune in to what you get, and you can use that as a vehicle for connecting with your intuition. I mean, lots of
Oh,
people will be familiar with other cards, but I really like these ones, and
ooh,
um,
that's
so
fascinating.
I
All
recommend
right.
them.
So speaking of books, what's a favorite book of yours to read or recommend or give away?
Ooh, um, I'm torn instantly between two.
Y- You can share
I
both.
think I'm going to go to okay, The Hidden Life of Trees,
Oh, that's so
which
good. I've
is
actually
by
read that. Phenomenal.
right, and that talks about kind of one aspect of the original kind of mushroom, the way that mushrooms connect forests and all the life of the forests. Um, and the other one that's in my mind, if I can, uh, no, I'm going blank on the full name. So let me not um,
Uh,
waste people's time with me trying to
It'll
figure
come
that
to you
out.
in the car on the way home, right? All the good stuff does.
Uh-huh.
So,
Well, yeah.
uh, well, what does freedom mean to you here on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast?
Ooh, um, well, freedom for me has such a connection with that sense of flow and of feeling like I can find my right choice and my right place and be, well, as you have described it, the person that I most want to be. And um, yeah, there's lots of things in the world which would want to restrict that freedom. So finding my way to get the most freedom within those constraints.
Yeah, sounds simple enough, but maybe not easy, right?
Not
Uh,
always.
well, where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you?
So the the website that's most relevant to the content of this conversation is jonfreeman.co.uk, and that's John without an H. So jonfreeman.co.uk. The one that's more relevant to anybody who's interested in new organizational work is spiralfutures.org. freeman.com.
All right, cool. We'll put that down in the show notes for you guys too. John's a fascinating fellow, as y'all can see. So definitely go check out what he's got going on and get ready to go deep, because man, that was so good, and I feel like we just scratched the surface. So thank you for coming and sharing your time with me and sharing your genius with everybody out there. Is there something I could have asked that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share about before we get out of here?
No, I don't think so. But I'm grateful for the way that you asked the questions and gave me the opportunity to go deep. I don't always get that. I've remembered the name of the guy who wrote the book I was thinking of. He's Stephen Harrod Booner, Buhner, and it's his last. Look for his last book. I mean, they're all good, but the last book is his masterpiece.
Definitely will.
And that's also about our connection with the world and with plants. So it totally speaks into that stage 8 reality.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Oh, man, I can't wait to check those out. Well, thanks for being on here again, John. Appreciate your time, and really grateful that we got this opportunity. Alrighty, you guys, thanks for being here. Appreciate y'all. If you found some value in this, share what you loved on social media with you, and maybe somebody else will benefit from the things you're learning. So thank y'all for being here. We love you guys. See y'all next time.
Bye.
Alrighty, you guys, thanks for making it through to the end of the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with us. Really grateful to have amazing listeners like you. Thank you guys again for listening. We love you, and we'll see you next time inside the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple.